Hi everyone, welcome to the second Whiskey Web Wednesday of 2021. For today's video, I am going to take you into the magical world of milling. So this is often an overlooked part of the whole distilling and whiskey making process, so why not take a few minutes now to learn a little bit about something that you might not normally learn about distilling. So milling is an integral part of the process. Once we've grown our barley here at Shelter Point Farm, we have the barley cleaned and then we store it in silos, and then we take it to the distillery ready to be milled before we then mash it, ferment it, distill it and mature it. So milling is, the main aim really is particle size and control. So if you think of like a barley kernel, it's quite big. It's not really ready for mashing yet. So what we want to do is break it down into smaller pieces, make it nice and small. But there's a control aspect too, because if we make it too small, then it's going to clog up the mash tun when we try and separate the wort from the grain. So there's a delicate balance to be had in the milling process. Another aim is also to leave the husk intact. The reason we want the husk to remain intact rather than to be smashed to smithereens by an aggressive mill is because the husk acts as structure for the grain bed, and that allows recirculation of the wort through the grain bed, and it allows efficient processing of the wort through the grain bed, which acts as a filter. Now if you imagine all those pieces of the grain bed were too small, then the processing speed really slows down. This here is not somebody looking at you through funny glasses. This is actually a 2-roller mill, and this is what we have here at Shelter Point. And the rollers go around like this, and the grain comes down the middle. So it's a very simple mill, and one that you'll commonly find in smaller distilleries. The key for the barley is friability and modification. So friability is how easily the grain is broken up by the mill, and modification is part of the malting process. So the more the barley is modified, then the easier it is to break up in the mill here. Two key components or forces within the mill are compression and shear. So this gap between the two rollers is the compression. If a malt isn't very well modified, then you have to narrow that gap to break it up. It's harder to break up. But if you have too much compression, then you'll end up releasing beta-glucans into the wort, which can cause viscosity issues as well. So that's something you have to be careful of. Shear is how different the speed is between these two rollers. In some 2-roller mills, one of the rollers is driven by a machine and the other one is not. So the barley acts as an agent between one roller and the other. But you get a lot of shear in that kind of system, and that can actually tear the husk apart, which is what we don't want. So you want a bit of shear, but not too much. And there's a trade-off as well in milling between yield and wort separation. So we want a nice amount of small particles, but not too small that we affect wort separation. So the smaller the particles, the higher the yield will be. But the smaller the particles, the more difficult the wort separation. So that's the two kind of things that are opposing each other. So the ideal goal here in most Scotch distilleries or single malt Canadian distilleries is we're aiming for 20% husk, 70% grits and 10% flour. And how do we check that? Well, we use sieve plates, and if you're wondering what these numbers are, these are different sizes of sieves. So number 14 collects the husk, number 30 collects the middles or the grits, and number 60 collects the flour. And in Scotland it's called a shugel box, because it's something you shugel around. The barley goes down once it's been milled, and then you check the weights of each, and you're looking for 20%, 70% and 10%. And if you're hitting those, then you're good to go. So I'm going to take you to the distillery now, and I'm going to show you our mill, So enjoy the little tour behind the scenes at Shelter Point Distillery. Any questions about milling, let me know. And yeah, let's see what it's like. Cheers, guys. So here we are at Shelter Point Distillery. There's 2 silos here, 15 tons each. It's number 2 on the right and number 1 on the left. So in those we put either unmalted or malted barley. There's the tractor, gets the grain. And then in the milling room we have our German Engel mill. In the UK you might get more Bobby or Porteous mills that have been going for 50, 80 years. They're so reliable they went out of business. Let's see if it's the same with this German one. Here's our button to turn off the mill and on. Put that safety button on there and we can switch between bin 1, bin 2. Here's where we can check the grain. So at the moment we're doing unmalted barley for a Montfort whiskey, which is 100% unmalted. And this is where we can change the space between the rollers. So if you look there, we've got M for malted, U for unmalted. I'll just change this here. To whatever distance we like. And this handle here opens and closes the slide gate. And we've got the auger into the hopper. And check the temperature of the grain. It varies through the seasons, so obviously if it's colder we need to increase the strike temperature of the water. You can check the level of the barley in there. And then the weight. So at the moment we've got 629 kilograms of unmalted barley in there. And we'll typically grind up to about 12 to 1500 kilograms, and then we'll take a ton or maybe 1.2 tons out. So let's fire it up. It's going to be a bit noisy, so just bear with me. There you have it, milling at Shelter Point. Hope that was useful.